HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Best That You Can Do Stories by Amina Gautier, read by Lanecia Edmonds. Puerto Rican. What she finds. What she finds on the rooftop is her friend Inez's brother, sitting quietly on an upturned milk crate, smoking a cigarette. Because Inez won't let him smoke inside the apartment, he's come up here. But dinner's almost ready now, so she's been sent to fetch him and bring him down, which she is more than happy to do. She'd wrangled an invitation to come for dinner on the third day of his visit, believing 2 days was enough time for the siblings to catch up. She'd arrived at the appointed time, but dinner was nowhere near ready. Inez was still washing the rice and soaking the beans. The cilantro, garlic, onions, and peppers were all sitting out on the counter, waiting to be turned into sofrito. She'd been dying to meet this brother ever since she and Inez first became friends. Ever since that first time Inez invited her over and she saw a picture of him in his soldier's uniform hanging on the living room wall. Inez had gestured to the picture and said, "That's my brother. He's pleased to meet you." But the man in the picture didn't seem as if anything ever had or ever could please him. His face was stern, his eyes belligerent. He hadn't looked anything like his kind, warm-hearted sister. "When we're all together, you can see it," Inez had said, all the puzzle pieces clicking in. Downstairs in the apartment, she'd thought she could see past their starkly different complexions. Inez was pale where her brother was red, ruddy even, and detect their resemblance. But up here on the rooftop, sitting erect atop a milk crate as if he might be called on by a superior at any moment, Inez's brother looked like he isn't related to anyone but himself. He turns when the door slams behind her, tense as if for battle, but relaxes at the sight of her. Gallantly, he rises from the milk crate and offers it to her. She nods her thanks, thinking that in a family dominated by girls, he must be used to giving way. Altogether, there were 4 siblings, 3 sisters and 1 brother who had come from Puerto Rico and had now spread across the Northeast. The other 3 had all gone to Connecticut. Only Inez had chosen to settle in New York. How was it that the older twin had picked Brooklyn, settling into this apartment in a brand-new housing development in Brownsville, just a stone's throw away from the children's public library, while the other 3 opted for New England? These were all the things she could have asked her friend, but had chosen not to. Now, on this rooftop, whose heat shoots up through the thin sole of her borrowed sandals, she poses the question to Inez's brother. "She's not the older twin," he says, "and she didn't come here first." "Why didn't she go to Connecticut?" He shrugs and offers her his cigarette. When she declines, he flicks it over the edge of the rooftop. "She always wanted to be different." "That's what I want too." She hasn't meant to say such a thing out loud, especially not to a stranger. But as soon as she does, the truth of it simmers through her. She knows why her friend would buck the trend. She, too, has a bevy of siblings, and though she loves them all, it's hard to ever feel the separateness that she needs to define herself. Her brother is a Mason, and 2 of her sisters became Eastern Stars like her mother. But she passed on joining, even though it would have made her mother proud, even though it would have completed the set. Besides, he doesn't feel like a stranger to her. Her visits with his sister were all full of talk of him, the family's only boy. He's sandwiched between the twins and the baby girl, a middle child if you count Inez and her twin as one. He'd been drafted into the army, serving because he had to, not because he'd chosen to. And now that his time was done, he'd come here to spend a week with his older sister. Soon enough, he'd head back to the other two in New Haven. "What's Inez's twin like?" she asks. "Is it hard to tell them apart?" "They don't look like twins," he says. "They only look like sisters." She wonders what he plans to do when he gets back to New Haven. He's 20, like her, and she wonders if he's got his life figured out, or if he's still searching. She wonders what he thinks of Brooklyn, a place where she has lived and where she always expects to live. She wonders if he'll stay in New Haven or go back to Puerto Rico, and then remembers Inez had said that their parents died some time ago. She thinks of the apartment buildings near Coney Island and how the people who live there can step over to the beach any time they like, whereas she and her family have to load a shopping cart full of towels and coolers and beach umbrellas and bump it down the subway station at Nostrand to take the A to J Street before switching to the F, and how nice it would be if you could just grab a towel and walk out your door and be right there. She wonders if that is what it's like in Puerto Rico, if he could just walk from his old home to the beach, if he could hear or see the ocean from wherever he stood. These are questions she could have easily asked his sister, but had never thought to. Now, on the rooftop, facing the water tower on the adjacent roof, she burns with curiosity. "You have to take a bus or drive. The ocean's not that close. Not close enough to see, but I can always hear it," he says. "Inez can't." "Because she's been gone so long?" "She never could," he says. It seems special, like a superpower, a rare gift, akin to the way her own brother can remember every word he's ever read. Before he got married and after he came home from the army, they'd spent the hour after church rolling loose change into paper wrappers to take to the bank, and he'd recite to her every article he'd read in that morning's paper, so that listening to him had been like having her very own radio tuned to a station just for her. They hadn't owned a television yet, and even 6 months later when he bought one for their mother, she was sure her brother was better than all those television shows combined. He crouches beside her, his head close to her knee, to rummage through a small green sack that she hadn't noticed inches from her feet. "What's inside?" she asks. Never has she been so curious, but sitting on the rooftop on a summer night, anything seems possible. There's no one to overhear if she says something foolish. Anything she says can simply float into the night stars. She pretends that the ink-dark sky is the ocean and that she can swim it from here to his home. "I'd like to take your picture." He pulls a compact black camera from his bag. A brownie Hawkeye. Her brother has one just like it. "If you give me your address, I'll send you a copy." He lines up the flash holder and attaches it to the camera's side. He holds the camera in both hands and aims it at her. "Ready?" "Not like this?" she asks, meaning she's not dressed for picture taking, meaning perhaps he should come back another day after she's visited the beauty parlor and had her hair washed, pressed, and curled, after she's powdered the sheen of sweat from her forehead, chin, and clavicle, and switched her sundress for something less casual and far more lovely. He releases the shutter, snapping a picture of her just as she is, sitting on the milk crate, before advancing the film to take another and another. He says, "Like this you are, Linda." And she can guess what the foreign word means. He pulls his jacket from the bag and turns it inside out before placing it on the rooftop's tarred floor. "Pretend you are on a beach and you are lying on a blanket." He holds out his hand and she lowers herself onto his jacket. She leans back on her elbows and crosses one leg over the other, posing just the way she remembers Eartha Kitt posing for an issue of Jet the previous year. She pretends she is Eartha Kitt in a spangly evening gown, rather than just herself, clad in a cotton sundress, with thick, sturdy straps, and shod in the thin-soled sandals she'd borrowed from her older sister without permission. She does as he suggests and pretends that she is on a beach, but she goes a step further. She pretends she is beautiful. She closes her eyes and pretends there is a breeze coming off the ocean they share, and that the breeze is as soft and gentle as fingers ruffling the curls at her temples and ears. When she opens her eyes, the pretending is true, and he's on the ground beside her, his hands lightly trailing through her hair, feathering across her cheek. When he looks at her, the sternness is gone, and there is only longing. She feels like a breeze carried across the sea. She says, "Your sister sent me up here to tell you dinner's almost ready," and lets him help her up. Standing, she brushes off her hands and feels grains of sand on her fingertips. He apologizes for keeping them up here and away from dinner. "After all," he says, "you must be hungry." "Yes," she says, by which she means not at all. She can't imagine she will be hungry ever again. Buen provecho. We will never learn to speak Spanish. Our mother fights us every step of the way. She wants nothing to do with her father's language, nothing that reminds her of him, including herself. We've seen the proof in the pictures, those Polaroids from the 70s capturing her attempts at being a foxy mama. She'd tried to transform her fine hair into an afro, hoping the do would make the neighbors stop asking her what she was mixed with and put an end to the Puerto Ricans calling her out on the streets in a language she didn't speak. She'd heard that beer would kink her hair and lend it body, but all she'd ended up with were drunken curls. Because we know the lengths to which she'll go, we keep our efforts secret and learn behind her back. On Saturdays, we work on our weekly book reports at the Stone Avenue Public Library, and on our way home, we stop to visit our grandfather's sister, who lives in the projects nearby. Our TT buzzes us up, and when we get off on her floor, she's standing in her doorway, waiting for us to get off the elevator, watching out to ensure we arrive in one piece. She closes the door behind us and turns a series of locks before sliding on the safety chain. She hugs us and says, "Come on in, kids. How are you?" We hug back and respond, "No hablamos inglés," and our weekly game begins. For the rest of our visit, she'll speak only Spanish. It doesn't matter that we can't answer, let alone understand. We soak up her words, guessing at their meanings, and do our best to follow along. After she sets the table, our Titi says, "Siéntense," and we take our seats. When she sets the food before us, arroz con pollo, arroz con grandules, arroz con hueyes, arroz con habichuelas, always arroz con something. We say, "Gracias," and she pats our cheeks in approval. Before we take our first bites, she says, "Buen provecho," and makes us repeat the same. We eat our fill of plates piled high with rice as our Titi fills our ears with words. We remember please and thank you and I'm sorry and just a handful more. Not enough to make a sentence, just enough to not offend. Our Titi says these words are the bare necessities and that politeness will take us far. Just before we leave, she bends and cries, "Besos, besos," covers us in kisses, and makes us promise to come again soon. She wants us to give our mother her love, but of course our mother can't know that we were even here. We sling our book bags across our shoulders and troop out past the kids playing in the courtyard, past the teens leaning on the fences and checking their beepers, past the cars driving by with their booming systems, and past street after street of housing projects on our way to our own. We practice rolling our R's all the way home. Arroz, we say, gagging at the back of our throats, struggling to master the trill. Arroz, arroz, arroz. We sound like pirates, angry, gargling pirates, but we don't care. We only have 10 blocks to practice. Once we turn up our street, we have to put our words away. Still, they slip out when we're not careful. Hours after we've shown off our trove of borrowed books and our mother has checked our homework, she's at the sink straining the spaghetti for dinner when my brother points to my chair and whispers, "Siéntate." "Siéntate," I whisper in response, pointing back at his. As if we've rehearsed it for a dance routine, we sit at the same time and scoot ourselves forward. Our mother joins us at the kitchen table, and we link hands and bow our heads and close our eyes to say grace. She squeezes our fingers at the end of prayer to signal that we can eat. Taking up our forks, we twirl our spaghetti, forget ourselves, and say to each other, "Buen provecho." Our mother snaps her head up. "What was that?" she asks. "What did you say?" "Nothing," we lie. "You know I don't like that kind of talk," she says. "I don't want to hear that in my house." We hang our heads and squirm under her scrutiny, afraid to meet her eyes. She leaves her food untouched and watches us instead, eyes scanning back and forth between us as we sit quietly and do our best to pretend this whole thing never happened, until she suddenly pushes her plate away and rushes from the table. If only we could say that we ran right after her, fast on our heels to apologize for the error of our ways. But even though our Titi fed us only hours ago, we are hungry once again. Before we check on our mother, we finish our meals. After we've cleaned our plates, we polish off hers. Once we've eaten everything in sight, we seek her out and find her in her bedroom, curled into a ball on top of the comforter, her back to the light shining in from the hallway. We didn't mean to make her cry. "We're sorry, Ma," we call from the doorway. "We didn't mean the words we said." She flinches when she hears our voices, covers her hands with her ears, and curls her body even tighter. "I just don't want to hear that." We leave our words behind as we kick off our shoes and climb onto her bed and pry our mother apart. We each take a side and surround her, close as mercy, as we uncurl her legs and burrow beneath her arms. We soothe her into silence, patting her shoulders and back to beg pardon, huddling close to make her hush. Drowsy with dinner and the warmth of our mother, we sleep glued to her all night. In the morning, she'll forgive us, and we will put this all behind us. We'll never speak of this night again. No, we will never say another word. Puerto Rican. "More like a Puerto Rican," Tio Charlie said. I was 14 that summer, and my uncle was 23. 2 weeks earlier, I'd boarded a plane at JFK for Puerto Rico. It was the third summer in a row that my folks had sent me over to visit my grandfather's family, and the first time I'd made the trip by myself, unaccompanied by Titi Inez. At 14, I was finally old enough to get my working papers, and I'd wanted to stay at home in Brooklyn and have my first summer job. Most of my friends had found jobs in rec centers and fast food joints. My best friend had taken a job at the McDonald's on Atlantic Avenue. She'd had given me free milkshakes and hot apple pies all summer long. Me? I'd hoped to run the POP ticket booth at Coney Island's Astroland Park, or to work the concession stand and make popcorn at the Metropolitan or Duffield movie theaters. Instead, I had to spend the summer tucked away on an island, stuck in my grandfather's house while my friends at home made money hand over fist. Last summer, Charlie had been as trapped as me, hungry for a place to DJ. He'd tried every spot to see if someone would take him on, but no one would. This summer, he had more gigs than he could handle. He disappeared every night and napped away the mornings, coming out of his room for breakfast in mid-afternoon. I was keeping him company at the kitchen table while Abuela made him something to eat. When I'd arrived 2 weeks ago, they'd all exclaimed over how tall I'd gotten. My grandfather had positioned me beside Abuela for comparison. The summers before, she and I had been the same height, but now I easily towered over his tiny wife. That night, when Titi Christina came home from work, I towered over her, too. Every day since I'd arrived, Charlie had made some comment, telling me I was a palm tree, saying I should play basketball. He said that I must have gotten the height from the black side of my family. But I'm also Puerto Rican, I'd said. It could have also come from there. That's when he'd called me Puerto Rican. My uncle plucked 4 quarters from the pocket of his jeans and plucked them down on the kitchen table. "That's me," he said, lining up the quarters near the bottle of syrup. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then he slid 1 quarter away from the others and over to me. "In this one, Nena is you." Abuela turned from the stove in time to see what he had done. With her free hand, she pinched him. "Charlie, leave Nadia alone." She turned up the frying pan and dumped a pan-sized pancake, the biggest pancake I'd ever seen, onto his plate. My uncle didn't notice how his words stung. He poured syrup over his mega pancake and devoured it while I sat across from him, a throbbing, living welt. If I'd complained, he'd have been bewildered. What he'd said was supposed to be a joke between us, something I was supposed to find as funny as he did. "It's important," my mother had said when I'd complained about the visit. "You need to know your family." Tio Charlie's father was my grandfather, but his mother was not my grandmother. She was my grandfather's second wife. Abuela was simply a courtesy title. Charlie and I weren't all the way family, just half of my mother was his sister. Part of my uncle's blood was my blood, but only 1 quarter's worth. Not enough to make me anything more than a summer vacation relative. After he finished his breakfast, Charlie sent me outside with those quarters to the Bochinchera's house with orders to bring us back 2 limbers. When I scooped up the quarters, they weighed down my shorts, making it difficult for me to lift my legs, forcing me to limp. When I returned, Abuela was in her bedroom watching telenovelas, and Charlie was gone from the table. I followed the muffled sound of music down the hall to my uncle's room and knocked. Inside, there was barely any space for anybody, so crowded was the room with his equipment. Charlie's bed was pushed into a corner, and crates full of LPs topped his nightstand, blotted out the mirror on his bureau, and took up all the space on the floor. Each night, he lugged these crates out to the car, piling them in the trunk of the family's dusty green station wagon, ready to spend the night away at the clubs. He didn't take the limber I handed him. "Later," he said. "Nadia, check this out." I joined him behind his makeshift DJ stand. I squeezed the plastic cup that held my cocoa limber, pushed up the icy treat to my waiting mouth, licking the cold, sweet, slushy dessert while my uncle spun his tunes. He played the season's hits, Poison, Bonita Applebum, and the Humpty Dance, seamlessly blending one song into the other. I closed my eyes and I was back in Brooklyn, lying on my stomach on the floor of my living room, listening to the radio, my head close to the speaker as I tuned in to 98.7 KISS FM. I opened my eyes and Charlie shook his head. "I can't believe you got so tall," he said. He piled his hands atop my head and pushed down like a game show contestant pressing a buzzer, pretending to stunt my growth. "One day," he predicted, "you might be as tall as me. Height runs in our family." "But I'm only a Puerto Rican," I reminded him. "No, Nena," he said, "that's not true at all." Rerun. If we flip the channels fast enough, we can turn almost anyone Puerto Rican, blurring black and white into Boricua. When we can't find a good show with a Puerto Rican actor, we make our own, turning the knob selector on the TV as hard and as fast as we can, watching all the brown faces slick by until our mother yells from the kitchen for us to choose a show and stick to it. Reruns all summer long because cable is brand new and only for the rich. Like everyone else, we want our MTV, but we never get it. We're stuck with the same old summer vacation lineup of mornings filled with game shows and soap operas, of summer syndication afternoons and reruns of Fantasy Island, Gidget, Good Times, Happy Days, and Trapper John, MD. Our mother says it's important to see oneself on the big and little screens. She goes on and on about growing up watching Rita Moreno in West Side Story and Nichelle Nichols on Star Trek. And every Easter she makes us sit through the greatest story ever told to see Jose Ferreira play Herod the Roman Tech Track. Satisfying our black side is easy enough. We've got George and Wheezy, Fred and Lamont Stanford. We got Webster, Tootie, Arnold, and Willis. We've got Raj, Dwayne, Rerun, and Dee. We've got the Evans family, Florida, James, Michael, Thelma, and JJ, a.k.a. Kid Dynamite. But we still have to work to find the Boricuas. We collect Puerto Rican actors the way other kids collect comics, valued all the more because they're so rare. The Boricuas are hard to find and easy to miss. Cast to blend in and play Asians, Italians, Jews, Mexicans, and Romans. Almost anything but themselves. Sure, we know we can find plenty on Channel 41 and 47, on Univision and Telemundo, where all the shows are in Spanish. But that's a language neither of us speaks. Don't give up, I tell my sister, who's taking her turn at turning. We sift through reruns of old shows, hoping for Antonio Fargas on Starsky and Hutch or Eric Estrada on Chips. We usually glimpse Gregory Sierra on Sanford and Son or Barney Miller. Last week, we found him on All in the Family, playing a militant Jew who gets blown up by a car bomb the moment he steps out of Archie Bunker's house. The men are easier to find than the women, unless you count Maria on Sesame Street, but we're too old for shows that are meant for babies. What we really want is Irene Cara in Fame or Charo on The Love Boat, but my sister lands on The Electric Company, and we get Rita Moreno instead. We don't want the woman our mother grew up watching, but she's everywhere we turn. She's the Siamese concubine, Timpton, in The King and I. She's the cleaning lady on The Cosby Show who works in the hospital where Dr. Huxtable delivers all the babies. And she's here on PBS all summer long. But we don't need a new abuela. We buried our grandmother 2 years ago, and there's no going back. It's too soon to settle, so we keep playing channel roulette. Finding Boricuas requires a careful hand and a discerning eye. We cross our fingers and hope for someone good. It's all in the wrist, I say, determined to do better with my turn at the knob. Stop here, my sister says when we hear the theme song to The Love Boat. I step back in time to see Charo's face encircled by the life preserver. Titi Charo, my sister whispers, happy with the day's find. We've seen Charo on more episodes of The Love Boat than we can count, and we like to pretend that she's our famous flamboyant aunt. She plays a Mexican woman, Angelina Patricia Ruiz Inez.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?